Hello and welcome to the Personality Psychology Podcast. My name is Lisanne de Moor and I'm the host of this episode. Today I'm joined by Dr. Joanne Chung, who is an expert on studying individuals' culture, self-concept, and emotional life during important life transitions. She is also the artist who was gracious enough to let us use her art for the podcast. Joanne works as an assistant professor at the Department of Psychology at the University of Toronto. I first met Joanne when she was still working at Tilburg University in the Netherlands, where she taught a course on professional development. Later, we worked together as the EGP Media Communications team, as well as on several other projects. Joanne, it's so nice to have you here.
Thanks so much, Lisanne. Thanks for the nice intro. And it's really, really cool to see where the EJP team has gone since I left.
Yeah, it's been quite a while since we first met. And I remember when I first met you in Tilburg, you were doing research on self-esteem and also on emotions. Can you tell me how you first got into personality psychology in general, but also into studying self-esteem and emotions?
Yeah, without going into too long of a story, I've always been interested in emotions, I think, just as a person. So when in undergrad, I actually was not particularly super focused on psychology as you kind of, alluded to in the beginning of your intro. I actually studied art for a long time. So I was really interested in painting people's faces and I guess I would describe myself as somebody who isn't so literal in kind of my depictions of people. I really like the feeling of the person or also just kind of their vibe. And so when I actually started becoming interested in research, one of my first research assistantships was in a lab that was focused on facial expressions of emotion and culture. So I worked with somebody at San Francisco State University, and his name is David Matsumoto, and he's done really great work on, how our expressions of emotion, nonverbal expressions of emotion, recognized and expressed across cultures, which is really cool for me. This is like my first foray into kind of methodology and measurement. But, after doing that work for a few years, I reflected on, what do I like about emotion? And I think I really like hearing about people's own experiences. So instead of looking at how much do you recognize this emotion in somebody else's face, which I think is an important endeavor, it was really about that subjective experience or the phenomenology for me. It was really great because when I actually was applying to grad school, and I applied to 7 places, I think, and I got into one. Thankfully, it was with Richard Robbins at UC Davis, and he's just such an interesting researcher because at the time I didn't really realize this, but he's one of the few that kind of merges the study of personality and the study of emotions, especially these distinct experiences of emotions together. So with Rick, I got very interested in the experience of these kind of they're I guess we would call them self-conscious, self-evaluative emotions like pride, shame, and guilt. These are the emotions that require some sort of cognition about the self. And so if you're following my very detailed description, then you might imagine that self-esteem is really linked to this, right? So it's how much do you like yourself as a person? Do you see yourself as competent when thinking about, other people in your life? What is that global evaluation made up of? And to me, it's really about that experience of these self-relevant emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I answered your question, but that is kind of whenever I reflect, it's really this journey from starting with looking at how are emotions recognized, how are they communicated, to how are they just experienced, and then the personality bit comes into it by seeing that dispositionally, people can really differ from each other in their experiences, in their daily experiences of pride, for example, right? Their experiences of guilt. So things like that.
Sounds really interesting. And I also really like how your story seems, at least how you tell it now, it seems very continuous. So it sounds really logical that from your interest in painting faces, you got into more studying how people are perceived or perceive themselves.
Yeah, that's funny that you say that. I think it might be one of those things where, right, like as we grow as researchers and as we're kind of growing in our identities. So, like for instance, my professional identity, it's easy to kind of draw those connections in hindsight. At the time, I was just like doing what I felt like and being
Hmm.
like, I hope that this works out. Especially in graduate school when I wasn't seeing the link so clearly between like the work I was doing. So just to clarify, in graduate school, I felt like I was doing two different things. I was working on kind of dispositional emotion kind of studies. So I was looking at pride, I was looking at contempt as a personality trait. And then I was getting really interested in like longitudinal studies and just how to kind of track people's trajectories of like things like self-esteem and ethnic identity. So I was like not I was like as a grad student as grad students we're kind of just like, oh, like this seems cool, this seems cool. One thing that I'll always remember that Rick told me was just like you can kind of see like at least the beginning of grad school is like a buffet of things, right? Like you're gonna go for your first round, try this bit, and then you go back for the second round for the things that you might like a little bit more, and then that maybe the third round where you're getting really full, you're just gonna go for your favorites. And that to me was what I did. I just was going with it. And now that I reflect, I'm like, oh, it makes sense. And especially with, recently in the past few years, like people are really merging that long-term developmental perspective with more short-term, intensive, longitudinal kind of perspectives. And that really opens up a lot of doors in linking those things together.
Yeah, definitely. I also really like your metaphor of the buffet. I think it's really nice. And I think it's also, it might be comforting for a lot of PhD students to know that you don't have to do the right thing. You don't have to find the right thing right away and then keep on doing that. But you really have this period in your life to sort of figure out what you want to do and what you like most.
It's funny when I think about like the work that I've done, it's just always been it's been hovering around similar topics over the past few years, but of course, you kind of go for like, well, this is super exciting to me right now, so I'm gonna run with it. And then maybe at the time you won't see those connections, but like after you do the project or something, you write it up, you talk to your friends about it, you talk to your colleagues, you realize, oh, like there's this continuity there, either from the methods that you're bringing or the perspective that you're bringing, or just that you're drawing these links without really knowing yet.
Yeah, that's really nice. And you also mentioned that you really got into this longitudinal development. This is also what I remember from when I first met you, that you were also really into statistical methods and really excited about doing what I think was very cutting edge methods. And I really like that you were so excited about that and also excited about combining these methods with more content topics.
So I have to laugh because it is funny, right? Like when we first met, like I was really interested in these at the time, like you said, were complicated, kind of very advanced models of that attempted to get at describing like these complicated longitudinal data. And you're right. So like it's really cool to see like how much it's changed in the past few years. And I would say two things. Like one, I've kind of slowed down on that because I think that it's weird because I identified as somebody that was so intensely interested in these things. And now I'm kind of seeing the benefit of looking at qualitative data, looking small, starting off with maybe just more of like actually, a descriptive, what's going on with our participants, what is going on with their experiences, that perspective. And I think, sometimes qualitative data is like it's just so rich. So I've been learning more about that. And then on the other hand, because I have been involved in these studies, I kind of take a combination approach. So like I said before, that the short-term intensive longitudinal designs merged with a longer term, kind of more traditional perspective of yearly assessments or something like that, trying to figure out how to best model that data, right? So like all at different time scales, what do you do? And So it's been interesting for me because I've been learning a lot about qualitative kind of approaches. And then also being like, okay, like what's the next thing for the data that, I'm collecting, have finished collecting, working with collaborators on.
I think you mentioned that it's different, but at the same time, it also feels very similar. So you're interested in examining data in new ways and learning more about it. So I guess in a way, it's just a different way of looking at data to learn more in ways that we didn't learn about this data before.
I mean, I think what's interesting is that as I'm getting older in the field, I'm not like ancient, but it's been, I think I graduated with my PhD in 2014. So it's been a minute. I think I've just become even more like humble about that there is stuff going on that we already, these methods actually, they're not like brand new, right? So like people have been utilizing, especially the qualitative approaches I've been learning about for years and years. I think what's happening, at least in my perspective, is that we're kind of zooming out a little and we're kind of being like, well, what's already here? And I think that's super important because it gets into kind of acknowledging the hard work that people have done previously and kind of just integrating that and updating the ways that, I kind of look at it as like adding to the methodological toolbox, but also making sure that like people's voices are included.
I think that's a really nice approach to take. I think you're completely right. Very little of what we do and what we think of is new in the fullest sense. There's probably something new to it, but yeah, we're definitely building on previous people's work. Of course, we also worked together for quite a while for the EJP media communications team, but I think by now maybe you've managed to take a step back and reflect on this long period. So I was just wondering, what role did it play in your professional development?
Before I came to Toronto, I was actually in the Netherlands for almost 6 years. So yeah, so when you mentioned that we met each other in class, it was one of the first undergrad classes I taught as an assistant professor. So I came to the Netherlands from California where I'd like been my whole life. And I came as a postdoc to work with Jaap Danissen for about a year. And then I just ended up kind of staying around. And I would say it was a really cool experience for me because, I'm Korean American. That's like my ethnic identity. That's how I identify. And so coming to the Netherlands was interesting because, when you like go abroad or you go travel, a lot of things that you kind of take for granted are just made very clear to you that like, oh, there's like differences even in, maybe some people might be like, oh, the Netherlands and the United States are not so different. But, there are differences. And so I think for me, like just learning more about personality research, like outside of North America. And actually, this is going to sound so silly, but like I remember like being like European Journal of Personality seems really cool, but do I have to be European to publish in there? So I never like seriously considered it as an outlet. And I remember talking to Mitya Back, who was editor-in-chief at the time, and to Jaap Danissen and being like, is this, like how, and so it was really cool because I was like, oh, there's so much interesting work happening. And I had already kind of like known about it because of the work I was doing is like, right, lots of longitudinal data analysis, lots of that thing, and that the pioneers of this research in my mind at the time, right, were in Germany, in the Netherlands. But it was a really cool experience for me because I got to talk to scholars from different places, work with you, which was really cool for me because, right, like I really enjoy mentoring and learning together. It was a great experience to expand, to learn. So if I'm thinking about professional development, just connecting with other scholars, hearing what they thought was important. So like, I remember one of the first things we did was just like create this template of questions that we might ask in our blog. Like, what do we want to know about personality scholars? And I always wanted to know like professional stuff for sure, but I'm always interested in like, how did this person get interested in studying personality? What do they like to do when they're not working? Like, what's their favorite music? Just finding out about their personality expression as well, right? So that was cool for me. It made me feel like connected to people despite like having different backgrounds, having different perspectives and different ways of approaching, what makes people different from each other and why.
It's a very thoughtful answer, and also good advertisement for the European Journal of Personality.
But yeah, no, I have appreciated my time at EJP, and then, just being mindful too that like what I really liked about when Mitya and our team started working together was that we wanted to really focus on early career folks, and I love EJP's mission even now, right, to like really attend to that and to bring people in. So really on board with that theme, and I just think that EJP has been doing really great in that area.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, so unfortunately, our shared adventure came to an end at EJP, but fortunately, we've been involved in other projects together. And I am also aware of some of the other projects that you have been doing over the last few years. But can you tell me more about some of your current interests and activities, or at least the ones that you're especially enthusiastic about?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, this is it's an interesting question. I think that one project that has just been kind of really the focus of my work for now, I'm thinking it's been like almost, it feels like, I'll check later, but it feels like 3 to 4 years maybe, or even longer, is the character project, which was done in the Netherlands. Even when I left, we were still doing data collection. So I was working with my team remotely, along with my co-investigator, Adulia Lacalia, who might be familiar to this audience. And so I've been working on that project, and that project, in a nutshell, is just a project looking at emotions and personality change in a special group of young adults of Syrian origin that have resettled in the Netherlands. And it was a project that, it might sound funny to some people who have like this very long-term perspective on lifespan development, but it was a year-long project. So it was 13 months. And what we did was we combined like a measurement burst approach with, traditional questionnaires that were collected over 4 time points, along with some other kind of, we also collected data from the electronically activated recorder. I think for me, like from a narrative identity perspective, it was probably a turning point, like a very important turning point, because I think it really informed the way that I approach research now. And so one thing that I am starting to do, that I'm hoping to do at University of Toronto, Mississauga, which is where I currently work, is to kind of take what I've learned from the character project and to apply like many of the methods, particularly participatory-based research methods, and apply it to the study of personality development in university, with a special focus on racialized students. And in Canada, that's really referring to non-white identifying people. So getting a sense of like personality change with the experience of kind of social structures in the university.
Yeah, I really, because of course you already told me a bit about the character study before, and I already heard a talk that you gave about this project, and you already mentioned some of your new project to me, but I really like your approach of doing this participatory research. Also in the talk that you gave, you really gave several examples of how in the character study you work together with the youth in setting up the questionnaires and the prompts. And I really, really like this approach. And I think it was really, inspiring. It could be and should be inspiring to a lot of people doing personality research.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I do want to acknowledge, right, that like this isn't new. It's just like combining or like integrating kind of stuff that's already been happening by like really awesome people, but just, putting it together. So again, like, if from a methodological perspective, you could just be like, this is just another method to add to my toolbox. But also it really transformed the project. I think for me, it gave us lots of insights about what the participants were kind of taking away from the project. And it gave us an opportunity to connect with them in ways that I think that, in the past, like I have never, because either I was collecting my own data, like at one time point, or doing it on an online survey, or just analyzing data, that was collected previously. So it was a really cool experience for me.
Can you maybe give some examples of the types of stuff that you did in the character project? Because of course I know about it, but I think some of the listeners might also be very interested in hearing more about this.
Yeah, I want to first say that there are a lot of things that we wish we could have done differently. So, right. And I think that everybody thinks this at the end of a research project. But I think here it's like really important, because one of the things that we failed to do in the beginning was include. So again, like remembering that the focus of the project is on the experiences of Syrian origin young adults. We didn't start the project with somebody who from that background, from that community in the project. And I think that's super important. So for anybody who's like curious, this is important for many reasons, because then you have a relationship that is being built or already built, right? You can gain insights about what like the study design is it going to be appropriate? Is it going to be something that the participants want to do? Is it going to benefit their community? These are things that we didn't do right away. We did pivot, and it was really, really cool because we had wonderful, wonderful researchers that were from Syria that joined our team, and we were able to kind of listen to them. And so some of the cool things that they suggested, so I want to give like nearly all the props to them because they're so wonderful and very forthcoming with ideas. Some of the things that we did were we tried to kind of offer benefits that were beyond compensation. So what does that mean? That just means that like, especially in the Netherlands, as an American, I was like pretty wowed by the compensation that research participants get, especially right if they're considered special populations, is that you don't want to offer compensation that might be interpreted as like coercive. But we weren't even, I think from my perspective, I was like, but this isn't even hourly pay, right? So when we were thinking about this, because recalling that we had people participate in so many different things, so they had a questionnaire 4 times in the study, they had to do a experience sampling study 3 times, they participated in the year, like some of them did. It's a lot. And so we thought, okay, why don't we keep in touch with our participants with the newsletter? Send them a small token of appreciation. So we did this after every wave, so 4 times. And what we did was we sent them like newsletters that let them know where the project was, how it was going, with some details about, for example, the first newsletter was like sharing resources for people, who had refugee status or were seeking refugee status. So things like that, along with, information like little infographics about the sample of people that we were able to meet, and how many handshakes did we have throughout the duration of the study? How many cities did we go to, right? Just kind of sharing along the way how it was going. And then we did that. And then unfortunately, what happened was the pandemic happened, right? So we were supposed to have a celebratory event at the end of the data collection that was in person, but we had to hold it on Zoom, and it was still really fun. But yeah, just kind of creating a space for our participants to come and share and to learn more about what was going to happen with the character project, what were their thoughts on how it went, what do they think that, we should do next, kind of things like that. So we did that. And then something that we just wrapped up recently was a seminar series on different topics in psychology that different members of our team and others put together so that our participants could come and learn about things like, cultural identity and growth and collective leadership and expressive writing even. So we just wrapped that up. And right now I'm wrapping up a book of some of our participants artwork that they shared with us. And so this book is meant to be online, and it's meant to be shared with various communities and just to be kind of another outlet of the experiences and the varied experiences of our different participants.
I think it's super cool, all the stuff that you did. It is unfortunately true that in the Netherlands, I'm not sure if this is the same in other countries, but the compensation is very, very low. In fact, I think it can't even be like hourly wage, so it has to be lower than that. But so I think it's really nice that you found this way to give back to people in a different way. I think it's more meaningful to also get these opportunities to engage with other people and also just to engage with the project and I guess learn more about the topics that are central to the topic for us as researchers, but might not be so central or so clear to participants. Are these also things that you're planning to apply in this new research project that you're planning?
One thing I do want to say is that it was encouraged by the ethics. This is when I was just like, this is awesome. Like, my experiences with ethics committees have been really, really difficult. And sometimes I'm like, wow, they're really overreaching. Sometimes I don't know if you've had this yourself,
Yes.
Lisanne, but this was a time where I was like, wow, like, thank you for really pushing us and for saying, hey, like, we really need to think outside of the box. And I also want to thank, right, like our colleagues and our research team for helping to come up with these really cool ideas. So definitely I'm intending to apply what I've learned. And I think it's interesting because we always think about special populations of people and we're like, oh, we have to do things differently there. But now I'm like, I don't know, like maybe I'm weird, but I mean, I'm definitely weird. But I think that in my experience, a lot of research would benefit from this, even studying university students, which I think a lot of people are like, why, that's boring. Like, why would you, this is just like the norm. Like, we need to look outside of it. But I think especially in the context of the place that I work at now, the University of Toronto, Mississauga, there's so much to learn about our really cool students. There's a lot of diversity there in terms of many identity categories, but I think just learning about if I want to do a study on the college experience, what would the actual students want to learn about themselves? I think that's super cool, right? Because like typically, I think researchers are used to taking kind of a top-down approach because we're like, okay, well, we think this is theoretically important, so I'm going to study this. But what are we missing when we don't ask? Like, do you think this is cool? Like, what do you think of this, like, study design? So I think that's what I really want to integrate, right? So co-creation is the key for me, I think.
Yeah, I really like that attitude and approach to research. And I think you're absolutely right that we usually feel like we should take this approach when we're studying populations that we feel are special or that we may not understand. But the truth is, I think that as researchers, we don't understand our populations in many situations, even when we were part of that group, such as these university students. But I really like your approach. You already mentioned our mentoring relationship, of course, and I think you've been having many more very successful and very fulfilling mentoring relationships. Is this also something that's a big part of your work now?
Yeah, thanks for the kind words, Lisanne. Yeah, totally. Like, I think too that right, I've been an assistant professor for now like 6 years. So I feel like I'm at that point where it's like I want to put out like the projects that I think are really important for me, for sure. Like, but I really want to, I think my orientation now is like, I want to kind of help people get to where they want to go. So I think that's generativity. Is that right? Kind of focusing on that is really, it's the most fun for me. And I think, yeah, hopefully my mentees also feel like it's fun too.
Well, I can only speak from my own experience, but I really, really enjoyed it. Not just reaching the end goal of a research project, but definitely also the road to getting there. And yeah, I think so far, because of course we're still working together, But it's been a really, really helpful and really interesting experience. I've learned a lot professionally, but also definitely like personal growth. So that's, at least from my experience, it's very, very positive. But yeah, it sounds like you're doing a lot of awesome stuff and also putting more awesome stuff out there in the future. Are there other big things ahead of you at the moment?
Yeah, so some big projects that I guess I've been working on. I don't know if they're projects, but maybe just kind of recognizing, right? Like I was just talking to you about wanting to create spaces within, the field, I guess, personality science for people of all identities to kind of be valued in their contributions and their voices. So yeah, so this summer has been pretty active on those fronts. So for example, one thing that I just did with really wonderful people is our first meeting of Ascend. And Ascend stands for Asian Pacific Islander and Desi social and personality scientists who care about justice and want to work collectively towards ending harmful identity-based violence and trauma. That's a mouthful, but it's really just creating a space for social / personality psychologists who want to come together and be in community, do science, talk about things that are specific to our communities. Yeah, to like just make our spaces better, right? And so I've just did that. And just been also participating actively in other groups where we're kind of working on trying to get people who are interested in anti-racist methodological approaches. So this is for people who are like, hey, like I want to know, like I'm interested. How do you, if you want to take an anti-racist approach to research, how would you do that? It's a kind of a pedagogy group with a bunch of really, really cool folks. So I just did something with that last week, and there's more stuff in the horizon. There's also, if I could give a plug to the Canada SROP, this is the Canada Summer Research Opportunity Program that just launched this year. It's their inaugural year. We've been working with BIPOC students, undergraduate students, having them come in for 8 weeks to work with professors at University of Toronto to get some research experience, to get a sense of what is it like, if I want to get my feet wet in research, what does that look like? So that's something that I've been doing.
Sounds really interesting and also like really great initiatives.
I also forgot that I am a co-organizer with a really cool committee for the Association for Research and Personality. We have our conference online. It's free. You don't need to be a member to participate or to register. And that's happening in July, on July 9th, 16th, and 23rd. So that's a big deal for especially personality scientists.
Yeah, and it's really, really great that it's free registration. Super cool. So a lot of stuff still going on and a lot of stuff still on the horizon. Perhaps more broadly, what do you see as the next steps for the field of personality?
I think it's just kind of going back to the definition of personality, right? So like I feel like most people that are interested in personality is that they recognize that people are different from each other. That we have different experiences, we're coming from different perspectives. So, all the things that I was talking about today, and thank you so much for asking me about my orientation to research and my perspectives, and also, how I got to doing what I do today, is just to acknowledge that, that maybe we can be more mindful of that, even on the kind of meta level, that there's just going to be different perspectives, and that in doing research and that they are valuable, that there isn't one way to get to the answer, that some research questions might be better approached through maybe one or two methods that might not apply to somebody else's. So just kind of keeping that individual difference approach or perspective in mind, right? One size doesn't fit all. And yeah, I think that's just kind of my broad hope for the future, that I think that we're doing really great, by launching these different initiatives to, especially through EAPP and ARP, for example, but just recognizing that people are going to have different things to bring to the table, and that they're valuable and that they're worth listening to, even if they haven't been included in the past.
So basically taking an individual differences perspective, but then at the level of doing the research.
Yeah. And also, right, like we know as researchers, we have so many different hats, right? There's so many ways to kind of, you might think, oh, like, I don't want to put the spotlight on you, Lisanne, but like as a graduate student, like how can you actually work on expanding the field or something, right? And of course, you can do this in your capacity as like a research communications editor, and even when you have symposia, right? But we also review papers. We like I said, we invite people to give talks. So it's like, who are we inviting? Has that person said stuff already? And it's kind of ironic because I feel like I've talked a lot this year, for example, to many people. So thanks for having me on this platform as well. But right, thinking of it that way, and just, or citing somebody, right? Like citing people, like making sure that we're just more intentional, I think, about really taking advantage of the diverse kind of resources that are already here.
Yeah, I really like that message. I think it's very important. And one probably many people feel like they know, but then in our daily experiences and daily doings of doing research, we sometimes forget, well, then we never have any change. So I think it's a good message to get out there.
Yeah, and I do want to say, like, kind of along the lines of what EAPP is already doing, right? Like centering and focusing on young people's voices, like keep doing that. Like that's really cool, right? People like us folks that have already been around for a while, like it's hard to see. We may have like expertise in some things, but also we're open. Like young folks have a lot to bring to the field. And so kind of speaking up when you can, and sharing your opinions and your thoughts about research ideas and how the field is working for you would be really, I encourage that. I think it would be really cool.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Thank you so much for this interview and for joining me today, Joanne.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate having this opportunity to talk to you and talk to the audience.
Here's the summary of some of EJP's latest articles.
I'm René Matos, the editor of the European Journal of Personality. In this podcast episode, as usually, I will highlight a couple of recent papers published in our journal. I think it's pretty clear to most people that one of the biggest challenges that people, nations, and really the whole humankind is currently facing is dealing with the climate change. Regardless of whether we see this as a series of opportunities or a series of necessary sacrifices, or both, this will require efforts from many, if not most people. So, it only makes sense to assume that psychologists do their parts as well, in their personal lives and in their work. In a paper recently published online in European Journal of Personality, Chris Hopwood and his colleagues did exactly that. Using a large sample of New Zealanders, Chris and colleagues explored the links between environmentally sustainable attitudes and behaviors on the one hand and the Big Six personality traits on the other. And, because the participants had been tested multiple times over several years, they could also explore how the sustainable attitudes and behaviors co-developed with personality traits. The key findings were, generally, people became more environmentally mindful over years, which is obviously good news. And those with more sustainable attitudes and behaviors also tended to be higher on personality traits of agreeableness, honesty, humility, and openness. And what's more, some personality traits In particular, agreeableness changed in lockstep with the sustainable attitudes, meaning that those becoming more agreeable over time also increased in how environmentally mindful they were. So, to some extent, the degree to which people hold environmentally sustainable attitudes may be a personality thing, and hence squarely in the purview of personality researchers. For more details, either see our website or read a recent blog post by Chris Hopwood at agpblog.com. In another recent paper, using an experience sampling research design where people are measured at many time points over a period of time, Larissa Wieczorek and her colleagues studied adolescent social interactions. Specifically, they asked, are adolescents' personality traits linked with how satisfied they are with their social interactions? And if yes, could this link be explained by adolescents with certain personality traits perceiving their social interactions in certain ways? Larissa and colleagues found that higher extroversion and agreeableness on the one hand and lower neuroticism on the other predicted greater satisfaction with social interactions. And as they had hypothesized, these associations could be in part explained by adolescents' personality traits mattering for how they perceived their interactions. Again, for more details, either see our website or read a recent blog post by Larissa at agpblog.com. Finally, a new special issue just came out in the European Journal of Personality, focusing on personality dynamics at the workplace, and it was guest edited by Joanna Sosnowska, Yuri Hoffmans, John Routman, and Bart Wille. To find out more about this special issue, please head over to our website or listen to the April episode of this podcast with Joanna, who was one of the guest editors of this special issue.